I want to welcome all of you to this segment of Spirit of St. Mike's. We are fortunate to have many people as our guest. Today, we have a very special person with us and who doesn't need any introduction. In fact, if I look our panel, she should be the host because she was part of St. Michael's before all of us were part of St. Michael. So it's our own Wendy Fletcher, and she has a long association with St. Michael, as a child, her family, and all that. So we are so happy to have you, Wendy. Welcome to our midst.
Thank you, Sam. It's lovely to be here with you.
And maybe you can start by saying something about how are things with the family. I know you have a grandchildren and families growing, and share some good things that are happening in your personal life, please.
Oh, thank you, Sam. Yeah, everybody's good. We've come through the COVID time okay. Everybody's intact. In the middle of COVID, we had a new grandchild. So 6-year-old Addie has a new brother, Gordon, who's now 7 months old. He was born last summer. We were babysitting them this weekend on Saturday, and it was really quite exciting because although Gordon doesn't crawl yet, he's learned how to roll and to push with his legs. So Grandma and Grandpa were very surprised to see him propelling himself across the room, although he doesn't crawl yet, either by rolling or by pushing himself on his legs all the way across the carpet. So he's ready to be a man on the move, that little guy, but everybody's well. Thank you.
How's Mike?
He's good. He's busy. I mean, he's busy. The court is starting to change. The middle of April, everybody's expected to be fully back in court. So even if things are by Zoom, they're going to be Zooming from the courthouse. But this week he had a criminal trial in Hamilton, and often those are face to face. So it was a bit unfortunate that the weather was so bad this week, which is a commuting week to Hamilton.
Well, we have, as part of this conversation, Wendy, we have two of our regular hosts with us, Anne, Anne and Jean. And so Anne is going to start with you first. And so Anne, it's yours.
Yeah, so Wendy, you and I first met when you began coming to St. Mike's as our resident preacher. And that's not a position I think that most churches have. So can you tell us a little bit about what made you say yes when Sam asked you to come to St. Mike's as our resident preacher?
I have, thank you, Anne. I have such a long story with St. Mike's, but more than a long story, a deep and abiding affection for St. Mike's. I mean, from the time I've been a child, St. Mike's has lived in my spiritual story as a very sacred space, a very special space. So even though it's a bit of a distance from where I am, the thought of being able to engage with some frequency with the St. Mike's community and the really unique worship space that is created by the gathering of that community seemed like a real gift to me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
My turn. I don't think everybody knows, Wendy, about your longtime association with St. Michael's. For some, you are a new face. I wonder if you can just talk about how far back that association goes.
Oh, well, actually, this month is a bit of an anniversary month. We moved to, my family moved to London from Brantford when my dad was transferred from Weston's in Brantford to McCormick's Biscuits and Candy in London. Now, of course, a derelict factory, but then a thriving enterprise. So we moved when I was 8 years old, at the beginning of March when I was 8 years old. And of course, the Fletchers have long been Anglicans, multi-generational Anglicans, and Anglicans go to the church in their neighborhood. So we lived in the old Norton Estates. That's where we moved to. And by the second Sunday we were there, which would have been the middle of March, we started going to St. Michael's and joined the St. Mike's community. So it's the 50th anniversary of my first visit to St. Mike's. When I was there on Sunday, this past Sunday preaching, that was literally the 50th anniversary Sunday for us joining St. Mike's Parish.
Wow. A while ago. Thanks. Thank you.
Wendy, the question I want to ask is rather a different sort of nature. We hear about church and the challenges where churches are all facing. Particularly, St. Michael is at a stage of transition, and when we think about transition, a lot of images come to our mind. But especially, I want you to speak on your observation about the future of St. Michael's, given the light what we are doing with the new path and the new ministry that we have embraced. How do you see St. Michael's could potentially evolve and to be a new entity with some real impressionable presence in the community and be, I know this is not a word we want to use lightly, really become part of their lives, even if they are not members of a Sunday community.
Thank you, Sam. Maybe as a way of bridging the two questions, I'll weave backwards toward the future, if that's okay, in terms of how I see
Sure.
St. Mike's and what my imagining is about the place it holds in the neighborhood that it lives in and the possibilities for its future. When I first joined St. Michael's as a child, St. Mike's was very much a neighborhood church. I mean, it drew from the neighborhood. It was the period of still church. I mean, the statisticians will tell you the decline actually had started by this time, but it's still, St. Mike still saw itself as a church that was vitally engaged with the neighborhood and the children of the neighborhood. Many of the folks that I still know at St. Mike's today were part of that initial community of people that were from the neighborhood that raised their children in the church. And so it always had a sense, in my experience, of the community of a vital engagement embedded in its local context. Some parishes are drive-in parishes, but it was always there. It was a part of things. The kids that came to Sunday school were the kids that were in school together. I mean, there was a kind of a relationship fabric that was built between the church and the neighborhood that was really strong. I've circled away from St. Mike's over the years and come back again, so that as a young priest, I was an honorary assistant there for many years, and then later a second stage of honorary assistant, and then now in this last go round, sharing in the community in this role in terms of preaching. But the spirit of St. Michael's has remained the same. Like it's interesting. It's smaller, absolutely. St. Mike's, as with every other church in the story of the Anglican Church of Canada for the most part, and mainline Protestantism has declined. It has aged. But the spirit that sits there at the heart of the congregation is the same. And it's because that heart remains the same, that beating heart in the center of the worshiping community, that my imagination is that through the new path vision, that beating heart of commitment to a life in faith, to a deep spirituality, a praying community, a celebrating community, a worshiping community, a loving community, because that heart remains the same, that even though its relationship has evolved and shifted as folks fell away from church, not just in our neighborhood, but everywhere in the culture, that unique spirit of St. Mike's is alive and well and living in the middle of a neighborhood that I'm absolutely confident has a longing to be met in the ways that the St. Mike's community is currently imagining it wants to meet them. There is a longing for friendship. There is a longing in the neighborhood for supports. It's a newcomer neighborhood, and that welcoming sense that God is not only in the community, but in the people who are living in the neighborhood, that is so served as a thread, right? Like that thread that's just run through the whole story. It's a thread that not only is needed in the neighborhood of the future, but is I think, has a mission from God to be in the neighborhood. Like I really think it's that heart that is like a loving, beating heart, which I believe is the heart of God. Like the people, some are the same. The people change and go, as you say. Many people don't know me, but I feel as much a part of a St. Mike's today as I did when I was 10 years old and when I was confirmed there at the age of 12, right? St. Mark's is in me and I am in it, and the heart of God is in St. Mike's and in me and in the neighborhood. Although the neighborhood has changed, the community has changed, that beating heart of a gospel word of compassion and of welcome and of the possibility of healing in the hospitality of the people, if it's there. So even though the community is aged, I think that the vision for wanting to communicate that beating heart of a faithful worshiping community in ways that the neighborhood and the community can understand and receive as meaningful to them is there. So that will be different than the old ways. When I was a kid, that was speak the language of Christianity by making a Sunday school or a vacation Bible school, inviting people to come to church and worship. That's not the word the neighborhood now is waiting for. It is waiting for a word of welcome into a space where there is a place to belong, where there's support for the challenges that living in this harsh-edged world is bringing currently, whether that's for newcomers or elder members of the neighborhood who have been there a long time and who are living in isolation. There's a lot of economic need and challenge in the neighborhood. So that gracious spirit of open-hearted and open-handed hospitality that's been there since I was a kid, it's still there. Like we were there on Sunday, right? So that we're there preaching. I just, the worship space is unique. And can you imagine taking that worship space? Because part of the New Path vision, of course, is to make that sacred space community space where people will encounter the sacred by being welcome as ordinary folks who are not necessarily coming to fill a tick on a register or put money in a church offering plate. They're there because they need a place to belong and to be welcome. Can you just imagine it? I can just feel it, that spirit of welcome that is the heart of St. Mike's wrapping itself like loving arms around the people from the neighborhood who need to rest, who need to belong, who need to be seen, who need to eat, like all those things that the New Path is talking about as expression of the self in the neighborhood, making space for the neighborhood and its needs. It's beautiful, it's perfect, and it's entirely consistent with what the heart of St. Mike's has been for the 50 years that I've known it.
Beautiful. It's very intriguing, as you're saying, a place to belong. One of the catchphrases we have on our website is a place to belong. You know, if you come to St. Michael, and so as you speak, what I'm sensing is St. Michael's mandate is relevant as it was relevant 50 years ago. And go ahead.
Yeah, totally. And that the challenge is speaking the new language, right? St. Mike's is so deeply steeped in the gospel good news and in the language of prayer and tradition. The challenge now is to hear the language of the neighborhood, so that those who hold the ministry of the New Path can be universal communicators. In other words, by their actions, in their deeds, in their way of being, they find a way to communicate that old story, right? That old gospel story in a language that can be heard. And that may be a language that never speaks the word of God. I mean, it might never be. You might not, although the worshiping community will retain those things. It may be that when someone comes needing a warm place to sit, the language of religion will not be what communicates to them, but the welcoming hand that invites them to that warm place to sit will be the language of God for them.
Maybe that is probably the real foundation of the gospel. If we hear Jesus, he never talks about how much you know scripture. He talks about, I was hungry, you fed me, I was naked, you clothed me, and I was in prison, you came to visit me. So the whole idea of generosity and hospitality are the forefront of a church who wants to be alive in this day and age with the gospel without using the words of the gospel.
Yeah, it makes me think of the expression, preach the gospel, if necessary, use words, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Wendy, for coming and being part of us. You have always spoken from your heart and always inspiring. And indeed, we are blessed by what you have said. And we will see you again in person very soon. And thank you for joining us from Waterloo. And I know you have a long meeting ahead of you. I pray that will go well for you. And say hello to Mike for us as well.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for the gift of your friendship. your spiritual companionship, and the inspiration which all of you, each in your own way, share with me in this journey. I'm very grateful.
Thank you.
You too.
Let me conclude with a couple of verses from Psalm 62. For God alone, my soul in silence waits. For from God comes our salvation. God alone is our rock and our salvation and our stronghold, so that we shall not be greatly shaken. So we wait on God, because as we wait on God, God will guide us. The Spirit of God will lead us. So we wait for good things to emerge for the life of St. Michael. So in the meantime, have a peaceful week, an enjoyable week. Hopefully the weather will get a bit more warmer so we can all go outside and enjoy the sunshine. And take care, and God be with you. See you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye now.
So much.
Nice.
Well,